Appalachian After Dark. Episode 1. Something followed me in Red River Gorge. Some stories should stay in the woods. This one happened in the Red River Gorge. I spent most of my life in the woods. Growing up in Kentucky, it's just part of how you pass time. You hike, you fish, you camp. The forest isn't mysterious, it's familiar, like an old friend. I've camped alone dozens of times, and I'm not someone who startles easily. I know how deer move at night. I know how a raccoon sounds when it digs through some leaves or trash can. I know how the wind can turn branches into something that feels like footsteps. And that's why this trip stuck with me. It was early October, cool enough for a jacket after dark, but not cold. The perfect hiking weather. I drove out towards the Red River Gorge on a Friday afternoon and parked near a trail that I've used before. Nothing extreme, just a quiet ridge, not far from a dry creek bed. By sunset, I'd set up my tent in a small clearing. The ground was level, and the trees weren't too close. It felt like a good spot, the kind of place you'd pick without thinking twice. I built a small fire, nothing big, just enough to cook and sit beside while the light faded from the sky. By 9:30, the forest had shifted into night mode. Crickets, a distant owl, leaves settling, a gentle breeze through the trees. Nice, normal sounds, about the whole reason I go out camping in the woods. It's peaceful. Almost brings you back to like an ancient feeling of this is where you belong. But around 10:30, something changed. I heard movement in the dry creek bed. At first it was faint. I really didn't pay attention. There's normally weird sounds and stuff at night that your imagination just runs off with. But when you're in the woods long enough, you figure out that it's typically just a squirrel or maybe a deer sneaking through. But at first it was faint, nothing important, just a scrape. Then there was a shift of a rock, then another. Not fast, not random, but it seemed deliberate. I sat still and listened. It sounded like careful steps on stone, weight placed slowly, then paused. I remember thinking, that's not how a deer moves. Deer step light, quick, reactive. This was measured. I grabbed my flashlight and walked towards the edge of the clearing. The beam swept across the rocks. Nothing. No eye shine, no shifting shadow. And the moment the light touched the creek bed, the sound stopped completely. I stood there longer than I needed to. The woods didn't resume naturally. They felt like they were waiting. Eventually the crickets picked back up. I told myself, it must have been a deer. Maybe I just misheard it. That explanation fit well enough that I went back and sat out by the fire to enjoy the rest of my evening. About 15 minutes later, I heard something again. But this time, it wasn't in the creek bed. It was deeper in the trees, behind me. 3 slow steps. Pause. Another step. I didn't jump, and I didn't panic. I just turned slowly. The tree line was darker than the clearing. Dense. Layered. Nothing obvious there, but something felt repositioned. Not circling, not wandering, just repositioned. I know that sounds weird, but that distinction matters. There's a difference between an animal passing through and something adjusting its angle on you. Old stories around here mention not responding to anything that moves deliberately at night. I've always treated that as just folklore, or potentially a bear, which I come prepared for bear. You know, big sticks, loud noise, all that kind of good stuff. But this didn't feel like a bear. And normally bear around here are just black bear. They spook easily. They see you and run the other direction. The only real danger is if you walk around the corner suddenly and spook them, or the really dangerous ones is if you come between a cub and its mama. This didn't have the telltale signs of that. No other noises came, so I fed the fire a little higher anyway, just in case. By midnight, things seemed quiet again. I put the fire out carefully and climbed into my tent. For a while, nothing happened. Then I heard a sound that didn't fit. A single dull tap against one of the trees nearby. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. Just a knock. I held still. 30 seconds passed. Then, another knock. Same spacing, same rhythm, almost measured. I've heard wood knock sounds before in the forest. Branches shifting, bark splitting, stuff that you can generally explain to just the wind or maybe an animal bumping it. But this wasn't that. This was intentional. I told myself it was temperature change in the wood. Yeah, that happens. But then I heard something else. A soft inhale close to the tent. Way too close to the tent. That was disturbing. It was not sniffing, not snorting, just a slow, controlled breath, like something testing the air. I didn't move. And eventually, it went quiet. I must have drifted off after that because I woke up suddenly. Not slowly, suddenly. I checked my phone. It was 3:17 a.m. Something was pressing against the lower edge of my tent. Not collapsing it, just almost like leaning into it. The nylon curved inward towards my feet. Through the fabric, I could see the outline of something tall. Not hunched low like a bear. Not broad. More narrow. Vertical. It leaned slightly. And then I heard it. Clicking. A soft, rhythmic clicking. Almost like teeth touching. It becomes harder to ignore. The pressure lifted. 2 slow steps followed. Crap. Bipedal. Heavy, but controlled. Then distance. I didn't unzip the tent until sunrise. Morning light makes everything seem explainable. And the dark does just the opposite. When I got up in the morning, the fire pit had been disturbed. Not destroyed, just nudged. In a way that I definitely don't remember leaving it. Near the creek bed, I found impressions in the dirt. The ground wasn't ideal for tracks, but I could see where weight had pressed. Longer than a normal foot. Narrow. The stride between impressions was wide. I tried to rationalize it. Distorted prints, shifting soil, angle of light. Then I saw something between the trees. About 40 yards out. It was tall. Too thin. For a second, and I still question this, I thought I saw something rising from its head. Not wide like a buck's antlers, but higher, branch-like. It didn't charge. It didn't run. It just tilted its head like it was studying me. Then I stepped backward. Then it stepped backward. The movement wasn't smooth. It folded slightly, like retreating into shadow, and then it was gone. I packed quickly. Not panicked, just efficiently. As I walked back towards the trailhead, I stayed aware of my surroundings, constantly looking around to check and see if I saw that image again. About 100 yards behind me, I heard something. Soft, clear. My name. I didn't look back. There are stories in eastern Kentucky about voices in the woods, about mimicry. I've always leaned towards coincidence with stories like that. But I'll say this. I've now heard multiple accounts involving dry creek beds, clicking sounds, tall figures near tree lines, and voices calling names. Coincidence is always possible, but patterns deserve attention. I got back to my car, packed everything up, and got out of there as quick as I could. Today, I still hike, but I don't camp alone anymore, and I definitely don't set up near dry creek beds. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was misinterpretation. But when independent accounts overlap across time, geography, and people who've never spoken to each other, it suggests there may be something we don't fully understand yet. Some stories should stay in the woods.